Washington, Capitol Hill. In the Grand Hall of the government building, representatives of Republicans and Democrats gathered for another meeting, which was supposed to discuss important issues of the budget and border security. The atmosphere was tense even before the start. Donald Trump, entering the hall, as always, carried himself confidently, with his inherent self-confidence and bravado. He smiled broadly at his allies and cast a condescending glance in the direction of Democratic leaders. Among them, Democratic Congressman Mark Rogers, a bright critic of Trump, who has repeatedly publicly opposed his policies, stood out. After the introductory remarks of the chairman of the meeting, Trump took the floor. His tone was sharp, but expectedly assertive. "Friends, I am here to talk about the real defense of America. We all know that the country needs strong decisions, not your, so to speak, democratic fantasies." His words caused the first deaf discontent among Democrats. Rogers raised an eyebrow and smiled sarcastically, but remained silent, waiting for the moment. Trump continued, this time looking directly at the Democratic side of the room. "If we listen to you, our country will soon be in chaos. We all know that your ideas about open borders are just a way to increase the number of immigrant voters." The room stirred. The Democrats began to look at each other, and it was at this point that Mark Rogers could not stand it. He leaned back in his chair, shrugged his shoulders, and said mockingly, "Mr. Trump, it's interesting that you talk about chaos, considering who usually arranges it." The buzz in the room increased. The air smelled of imminent conflict. Trump's face tightened, his lips pressed together, and his gaze was directed directly at Rogers. Everyone understood that a real verbal battle was about to begin. A tense silence reigned in the hall, which lasted only a moment before Trump replied. "Rogers, are you here to lecture me? You, a Democrat who can't even bring order to your own state? This is ridiculous." The Democratic congressman was not at a loss and immediately replied. "At least I don't build walls that remain unfinished. You promised the best wall, and it still looks like your business projects, a great start and a complete failure." This offended Trump. His face turned red, he raised his hand, as if trying to interrupt the rumble in the hall. "My business is more successful than any of your bills. And as for the wall, ask the Americans who they support. They want security, not your leftist experiments." At this point, several Republicans murmured approvingly, but the Democrats did not stay away either. Rogers leaned forward and sharply replied. "Security? You call inciting a crowd to the Capitol security? You are not a politician, but a showman who is simply used to applause." These words were a direct blow. There was a sharp rumble in the hall, one of the Democrats applauded sarcastically. Trump took a step forward, pointing his finger at Rogers. "I have done more for this country than all of you put together. And you are just a careerist who wants cheap PR." Rogers smiled and threw the final blow. "Well, Mr. Trump, maybe you should go back to television. They say reality shows are back in fashion now." The hall erupted in laughter and cheers. One of the Democrats sarcastically shouted, "Trump TV. New season." The former president pursed his lips, sighed heavily, and turned sharply to his allies. "There's no time to waste on these losers. We'll see who wins." With those words, he left the room, leaving behind a wave of controversy, Twitter memes, and a new headline for every news channel in America. The next morning, work was in full swing at Mar-a-Lago. Donald Trump, enraged by Congressman Mark Rogers' verbal attack, sat in his office, intently scrolling through his phone. His Truth Social feed was already bursting with angry posts from supporters. Rogers is another lying Democrat who hates America. They want to open the borders to criminals. Shame. Trump leaned back in his chair and smiled. But that wasn't enough. He wanted real revenge. "So what do we know about this Rogers guy?" he asked, turning to his advisor Jason Miller. Miller was already holding a tablet with open files. He's a congressman from California. A big supporter of the Green Deal, liberal policies. Very active on Twitter. But most importantly, Miller paused, his wife works for a company that receives government grants for environmental projects. Trump's eyes lit up. Oh. So we have a typical corrupt person here, right? They accuse me, but they themselves steal money from the budget? Well, there is no official evidence, but some Republicans are already digging in that direction, Miller replied, winking. Trump slammed his fist loudly on the table. Okay, listen to me carefully. We are launching a campaign. First, I want a post on Truth Social. Something like, did Rogers receive government money for his family? People need to know the truth. We are already working on it, Miller nodded. Second, I want Fox News to raise this issue. They love stories like this. Call Tucker Carlson. Tucker's not on Fox News anymore, the advisor said sheepishly. Trump frowned. Hell, sure. Okay, then throw it at Greg Hatfield. Ann. We're having a rally in Florida. I want thousands of people shouting, Rogers is corrupt. Miller quickly took notes. And one more thing, Trump added, raising a finger. I want to make memes. You know those funny pictures? Give Rogers a Pinocchio nose. Everyone needs to know he's lying. The advisors could barely contain their smiles. Classic Trump. Within hours, the internet was already bursting with new theories. Fox News ran a story with the headline, Did Democrats Get Caught Corrupt? Rogers under suspicion. And a meme of Rogers in a Pinocchio costume began to circulate on social media. Trump smiled contentedly, scanning the wave of support on his phone. They wanted to fight? Well, let them get ready. This is just the beginning. Donald Trump was in his element. His revenge plan was gaining momentum, and the information space was already boiling. All the major conservative media outlets, from Fox News to Breitbart, picked up the topic of Rogers' potential corruption. Democratic congressman and public money, is Rogers' family getting rich? These were the headlines that filled the news. But this was not enough. Trump loved the show, and so he decided to take the next step, publicly humiliating his opponent at his own rally. Rally in Florida, Trump tears Rogers apart. A huge crowd gathered in Florida at a stadium decorated with red caps with the inscription, Make America Great Again. Donald Trump appeared on stage under bright spotlights. His exit was accompanied by a burst of applause. He picked up the microphone and, smiling slyly, began. Friends, have you seen this guy, Mark Rogers? Oh, he's a great fighter for democracy, right? The crowd roared. But isn't it strange that his family receives millions from the government? I say, corruption. Shame. The crowd shouted. Trump threw up his hands. But you know what's even funnier? I saw a picture of him. He actually looks like Pinocchio. And what do we know about Pinocchio? He's lying. The crowd roared. Trump smiled slyly. Oh, great. Now that's his new name. He's no longer Mark Rogers. He's Pinocchio Rogers. The stadium erupted in laughter and cheers. But Trump didn't stop. He prepared another surprise. A large screen behind the stage flashed a video montage, where Rogers' nose was artificially lengthened every time he said something in an interview. I don't lie, the nose grows. I care about honesty in politics, the nose is even longer. My wife has no connection with public funds, and the nose is like in a cartoon. The crowd literally burst into laughter. Just look at this guy. Trump laughed. Imagine him as president. He'll walk into the Oval Office and not be able to get through the door with that huge nose. Rogers' reaction, a response on Twitter. This show could not go unanswered. A few hours later, Congressman Mark Rogers exploded on Twitter. Trump is a master of fake news. But if he wants to play childish jokes, let him remember, I'm not afraid to fight. But the situation was already out of control. Videos of Pinocchio Rogers went viral, memes flooded social media, and talk shows discussed how Trump had once again turned politics into an entertainment show. And at that moment, Trump realized, he had won this battle. But the war was still ahead. After a grand rally in Florida, where Trump turned Mark Rogers into Pinocchio Rogers, the situation in the political arena escalated to the limit. Democrats were furious, the media was abuzz with headlines, and social networks were bursting with memes. But Rogers was not going to just give up. Rogers counterattack. The congressman called an urgent press conference in Washington. In front of dozens of cameras, he took a deep breath and declared, "Donald Trump has once again shown that for him politics is a circus. He has no arguments, so he hides behind memes and false accusations. But I have one simple message, I am not afraid of you, Mr. Trump." The journalists froze. If Trump wants war, he will get it. We will study every financial document of his, every suspicious contract of his companies. Enough hiding behind the show, it's time to be responsible for your actions. That same evening, Rogers' team launched a social media campaign, #TrumpLiesAgain and #TrumpTheFraud trended on Twitter. Democrats accused the former president of inciting hatred and called for a formal investigation into his businesses. But Trump, as always, was ready to strike. Trump's latest move. The next morning, a new post appeared on Truth Social. "Rogers talking about me? How sweet. But why is he so nervous? What is he hiding? Maybe we should ask his former business partners." It was a clear hint. And within hours, conservative media outlets were already publishing materials about Rogers' allegedly questionable business connections in California. Meanwhile, Trump decided to end the show in his own style. He organized another rally in Texas, where he took the stage and, after a pause, said, "So, friends, today we have a special guest." A giant inflatable Pinocchio figure with a Rogers sign was brought onto the stage. The crowd erupted in laughter. "There he is. Look at him," Trump joked. "Next time, the Democrats might elect someone who doesn't give up after at least one joke." The crowd applauded. And while the Democrats prepared their counterattacks, the truth was obvious, Trump had won the information battle again. Finale, a political game without rules. The scandal continued for several more weeks until the news cycle switched to other events. Rogers tried to restore his reputation, but his nickname, Pinocchio, remained with him. And Trump? He has proven once again that he is an unsurpassed master of the game of political scandal. And if someone challenges him, he will always find a way to put on a show that the whole country will be talking about. The end. But not for Trump, he is always ready for another scandal.